Hi there, in this video we're going to build a simple accordion using Django, HTMX and Alpine.js. We're going to show how we can load up courses dynamically using HTMX, and then we're going to use Alpine to control which of these particular accordions is open at a given time, and that will allow us to open and close these to view the details we want on the page. And accordions give you a hierarchical way to look at data, and it can be quite nice to include these in your web applications. Now this code will extend the Django HTMX chained drop-down GitHub repository, which I'll link in the description. To follow along with this, it would be easiest to clone this django-forms-dynamic branch. This contains the models that we're going to use in this application, notably the course model and also this module model as well. So if you want to follow along, make sure you clone this repository and get that particular branch, and then you should be good to go with the application. So let's get started and we'll see how to build this component using Alpine and HTMX. So let's start by adding Alpine.js to our project. So we've got an installation section here in the Alpine documentation, and you can get it from a script tag, and that's what we're going to do in this video. So this is the latest version of Alpine, version 3.9.0. We're going to copy that, and what we're going to do is paste that into our project's base.html file. So underneath the HTMX import at the bottom of the head tag, we're going to paste in that script from the documentation, and that will allow us to use Alpine in any template that extends the base template. Now, to create our detail page for the university, we're going to create a new template under this templates directory, and it's going to be called index.html, and this is going to extend that base template, and now we can use Alpine within this template. Next, we're going to define the content block that's expected by the base template, and we can end that block below that there. And within this, we're going to define a bit of HTML code that's just boilerplate at the moment, and we'll extend this later on. So I'm going to paste that code in here, and basically it's a header tag with a particular university, some lorem ipsum within a paragraph tag, and then also a button at the bottom. And later on, when we click this button, we'll load the accordion with the university information. But for now, that's all we need on this page. And one last thing I want to do is I want to allow users to navigate from the university.html page. This is the page that contains the form we built in previous tutorials. At the bottom of that, we can paste this anchor tag, and it references a URL called index that we're going to add to our urls.py, and this will take us to this page here, and we eventually want the view to return this new template here. So what we're going to do is save that, and we can go to our urls.py file, and we're going to add a new path within this template, and it's going to be at the info endpoint, and it's going to load up a view called views.index. So within the views.py file, we'll now create that index view, and for now we simply want this to render that template. So I'll paste this code in here. It renders the index.html template that contains this code here that we've just created. So let's see how that looks on the page. If we go back to the page here, we now have a link on this form page that takes us to a university page, and when we do that, we get this page here. It's got the lorem ipsum text, it's got the University of Glasgow header here, and we've got a button that allows us to view more courses. Now, at the moment, this button will not work. What we're going to do next is add HTMX attributes to load up more data on this page. So back to our new template, this button here, we're going to add the HTMX attributes to this button. And when we click the button, we want to load up the courses that we've got in the database. So we're going to create a new view for this and a new URL in a second. And we're going to reference that here within the hxget attribute using the URL template tag. So the template tag is going to load a URL called course list. We're going to create that now within the urls.py file. So underneath the URL we just created, we're going to add another one. It's called course list. So let's go to views.py now, and we'll create that new view as well. So it's called course list, and it takes the request as an argument. Now, as I said, the purpose of this view is to get all of the courses out of the database. So we're going to set up a variable called courses, and it's going to be equal to course.objects.all. And then we can create a context dictionary where we have the courses stored within a key called courses. And then finally, we're going to render this partial template here that we're going to create called courselist.html. So within the partials directory of your templates directory, we can create another one called courselist.html, and for now we're simply going to render out the courses that are in the context directly. So no HTML styling or anything like that, no HTML elements. We're just rendering out the query set of courses that we get back here in this particular line 22 here. So if we save that, we should now be able to go to the front end, and when we click view courses here, we now get a query set appearing within the button. So we're definitely fetching the courses from the database, and HTMX is returning them into this button. So our setup is working, but we want to change the hx target attribute so that the returned partial, which is this one here with the courses, we don't want that to be swapped into the inner HTML of this button. We want it to actually replace the button so that the button disappears. So what we're going to do is we're going to change some of the attributes, or rather we're going to add some attributes to this button here. The first one is the hx target. So I'm going to specify that to be this, which means basically the button itself. And finally, hx swap, we'll set that to outer HTML, and that means it's going to replace the button. So the target is the button itself, and we're replacing the outer HTML, which means it will disappear from the page and be replaced by the content. So if we save this file and we go back to the page, refresh, when we click view courses, we see our button is now disappearing and being replaced by the query set. So now that we've got that, what we're going to do now is build the accordion, and we're going to leverage some bootstrap styles for this accordion. So if we go back to this partial here, it's just rendering out a query set at the moment. Let's make this a little bit better. So we're going to create a div with an ID of course accordion, and then what we're going to do is we're going to create a template for loop. I'm going to say for course in courses, and we'll end that for loop here. So for each course we want to render out a card using the bootstrap card class. So I'm going to create another div with a class of card, and that's going to create that card effect on our page. And within the card I'm going to paste some HTML just for quickness here. So what we have is within the card we have a card header which contains an h5 with the course's name. So remember, we're iterating over these courses, and if you look at the models.py, each course has a name. So we are referencing that here, and that will be printed out in the header of the card. And then within the card body, for now, we're only displaying some 𝗬𝗻 text. We're going to change that in a little bit to add the modules associated with a course. But for now, we can just save the file and we can go back to the page. And when we click view courses, we see that each course in the database is now loaded along with some 𝗬𝗻 underneath. And they're loaded into these cards where the card header has a slightly grayer background, and the 𝗬𝗻 within the body is just displayed there as text. Now what we want to do now is in the card body we're going to add the modules associated with each course. Again, if we go back to models.py, you can see that there is a module model, and that has a foreign key to its parent course. So we're going to reference that within the template. Within the card body, let's add these modules, and we're going to do this underneath the 𝗬𝗻 text. So I'll create an h3 with the title of modules, and then underneath that we're going to create a UL, an unordered list. So let's close that off there, and within that unordered list we're going to iterate over the modules associated with the course. So for module in course.modules.all, and again let's end the for loop. So for each module that we get within the course's modules, we're going to print that out in an li tag here. So li, we're just going to render the module's name. So that's another attribute on the module object. So if we go back to models.py here, modules have a name, and the related name is modules. So we can reference course.modules.all here, and that will give us all the modules associated with a course. So let's save that file and we can go back to the page. If we refresh the page, we now see that we have underneath the 𝗬𝗻 text, we have the modules associated with a course. We've got machine learning and web development for computer science, and we've got topology for maths. So that's all working fine. We're getting the modules associated with a course. Now before we go on, we're going to make a quick optimization to the database code. So what we're doing at the moment in the template is for each course we are iterating over the courses, and for each course we're getting all of the modules associated, and that's going to issue another query for these modules for every single course, and this is called the n+1 problem, and we can fix that by using a call in the ORM called prefetch related in this case. So when we get the modules associated with the course, rather than doing that one query at a time, we can prefetch the modules using the prefetch related function. And this function, as its argument, is going to take modules, which refers to the related name in this particular module object for the courses. So the course has a related name of modules, which means you can reference it in a backwards manner by saying course.modules.all. So we're prefetching that here and we're storing it in courses, and that means we do much less database querying. You're not going to see any difference because we don't have a lot of data, but that will speed up your application by sending less queries to the database if you had a lot of objects. So we get the same result here. So that new query is working fine. We're now going to add Alpine to our project, and we're going to create an Alpine component. And this component is going to be in the partial that we're returning when we make the HTMX request from this button here. So when we return that partial, we're going to create a component here, and it's going to be on this div here with an ID of course accordion. So let's add an xData directive, and this is how you specify an Alpine component. It's with the xData directive, and we're going to set a bit of state here within a JavaScript object, and the state's going to say opened index, and we're going to set that by default to null. Now the idea behind this opened index is that when we click a particular header, we want to show that particular accordion. So we need to track the indexes to do that in this case. And when we click computer science, for example, that has the index of 0 in the template for loop here, which is here. And when we click mathematics, it's going to have the index of 1. So we're going to track what is the currently opened index in this state here. And when we click a new header, we can update that. So let's see how we can use Alpine to achieve that. Now the first thing that we want to do is to the card body, we're going to add an xShow attribute, and this determines whether or not the body should be shown. And we only want to show the body if the opened index in our state is equal to the for loop.counter. Now the for loop.counter is something you've got in Django, and this comes from when you have a template for loop, the counter will tell you which index you're at in the iteration in that for loop. So if our opened index is equal to the counter at a given time, it's going to show that accordion. So by default, opened index is null. So now we expect not to see any of the details under the headers here. So if we click view courses, we now see that we don't have the details underneath the headers. We only see the headers, but the actual content underneath that, the body, is now not shown. And we now need a way to update this opened index with the index that has been clicked. So that, for example, when we click computer science, we want open index to be 0. And when opened index is 0, the card body will show for that index because of this xShow directive. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a click handler to this div, the card header. And the header is what contains the course name and an h5 tag. And the syntax in Alpine is the @ symbol and then click for the event. That's the event name. It's a click event. When we click the header, what we want to do is update this opened index. And we want to set that equal to the for loop's counter. So let's say for loop.counter here. And whatever the index of the header that you've clicked is will now be stored within that opened index. So if we save that and go back to the page and load up these courses, we should now be able to click the course and we're able to see the details for that course. So when we click computer science, we can see the modules, and then if we click film studies, we can then see the details for that course. So we've now got a very simple accordion that allows us to click a particular course and see more information about that course. So that's the basic setup, and that might be all you need. But what I'd like to do is allow users to click multiple of these headers and show multiple details at a time. And to do that, we need to track not just one index, but we potentially need to track multiple. So if we go back to VS Code, I'm going to change the xData and let's call it open indexes to indicate that we can have multiple. And we'll set this initially equal to an empty JavaScript array. And now when we click a particular header, we want to add it to the array if it's not already there, or we want to delete it if it is there. Now we'll explain this in a second, but we're going to reassign this open indexes, and we're going to make that equal to a function that we're going to create in a second, and it's going to be called toggle indexes. And this function is going to take 2 arguments. Firstly, it's going to take the open indexes, which comes from the Alpine state, and the second argument is the index that we're interested in at this particular event. So it's the for loop.counter. We can pass that in with that syntax there as a second argument. So we now need to define this toggle indexes function. So at the bottom of this partial, let's define a script tag, and we'll create a JavaScript function with the name of toggle indexes, and we can close off this script tag here and we can add the arguments to this function. So the first one is the open indexes array, and the second one is the index that we are interested in at this particular event. Now there's 2 scenarios we need to handle. Firstly, we will click a header that is not already in the array. In that case, it should add that index to the array. And the second possibility is if you click an item that's already open, you want to then close it back and we want to then remove that index from the array. So let's start by adding the index when it's not open already. For example, if we click computer science right now, we want to add that index to the array if it's not already there. So back to the function. So what we first want to do is we want to check whether the index is not in the array. In that case, we will then add it to the array. So let's create an if statement to check this, and we're going to say if the open indexes does not include, and JavaScript arrays have this includes function, and you can check whether something is in the array. So if the open indexes array does not include that index, then we can add it. So what we're going to do is we're going to return a new array here with the new index added to this open indexes array, and then that will be reassigned to this open indexes here, because on the click event we are reassigning to open indexes the state whatever is returned from this function. So what we're going to do here is return a new array that includes our new index. So we can use the spread operator to get all the items that were in the original array, and then we add the new index to that. So this handles the case where the index we're interested in doesn't already exist in the open indexes array, and then we add it, and then that should then show it on the front end here. So let's save that file here and we can test this out. But before we do so, we actually need to change this here. So the card body is only shown in this case if the opened index is equal to the for loops counter. But now we have different states called open indexes, so let's change this statement here. And we're only going to show the card body if the open indexes array includes the for loop.counter. Remember, for loop.counter will track which iteration you're on, and if it's been added to the open indexes, this will evaluate to true, and if the for loop.counter at a given moment is not in that array, it's not going to show the body because it will evaluate to false. So if we save this now and go back to the page, hopefully now when we click multiple of these, we can actually open multiple at once, and you can see that that works fine. But one problem we have is that we can't close it back down individually. When we hit one of them, it will close all of them. So let's add the second condition here, and if we go down to our function here, now basically what we have here so far is we're handling the case where the index that we're clicking is not already in this open indexes array. What if it is already there and now we want to remove it? That's the else clause that we're about to add here. So what we want to do in this else block is remove the index from open indexes array. So to do that, we're going to use the array.filter method in JavaScript. So we're going to return open indexes.filter, and to that, for each item, we're going to check whether that item is equal to the index, or rather whether it's not equal to the index. So we want to keep all the items that are not equal to this index, but any item that is equal to the index will be removed. So that will take this index that we're passing in, and because we're in this else clause, we know that this index is already in the open indexes array. So to remove it, we use the filter statement, and we keep around all items that are not equal to that index. So the one item in that array that is equal to the index will then be removed. So if we save that and go back to the page, if we view the courses, we can open multiple objects, but now we can actually close them down individually, and the state will update accordingly. So that's how we can open and close multiple of these accordions, these headers at once. And with that, we built a fairly simple and flexible Alpine accordion, driven by Django on the back end and driven by Alpine in one piece of state on the front end. Now, as a final bonus, we're going to add some small icons here that change depending on the Alpine state. Now, I'm going to link to this site in the description, but this allows you to take some icons and embed them directly in your HTML. And the icons I'm interested in are this one here, where you point to the right, and also the one that points down. So when the accordion is not open, for example, computer science, we want to point to the right. We want these icons pointing to the right. And when it is open, like physics at the moment, we want it to point down. So let's add one simple line to our file here, to our course list.html, and it's going to be in the header here. And this header is what you click here on the page to load up the details for that given course. And what we're going to do is we're going to add the icon to the left of that header. So let's paste a span in here with some X text, and we're going to do a ternary operation here in JavaScript. So if the for loop.counter is in the open indexes array, we're going to render this icon here. Otherwise, we're going to render this icon here. Now, these icons come directly from this site here. You can explore many icons or many alternatives, but let's see how this looks now. If we view the courses, you see that by default the arrow points to the right, but when you click a given course, that will update the arrow based on the Alpine state. and it's very easy to do, and that gives you a little bit more of, you know, a nicer look to your website, and you can explore this further with the modules and so on. And if you had a more fully featured site, you might even allow users to click these modules here, and HTMX could dynamically load up a module detail page, and that could give your site that single page application feel without necessarily using React or Vue or anything like that. And it shows nicely how you can use HTMX and Alpine together. So that's all for this video. Thank you for watching. If you learned anything, please like and subscribe. Check us out on Twitter, and we'll see you in the next video.